Hey there, everybody. Hope you're doing well today. It is Wednesday, the 18th of May in 2016. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Luke Thomas, and this is the Promotional Malpractice Live Chat. Lot to get to today. Results from UFC 198. Of course, we have the UFC 199 shakeup. Just as we go live, it was announced on Twitter that UFC President Dana White is going to be speaking on ESPN. Pull this up a little bit. What I'm assuming is going to be the replacement for Cris Cyborg being out against Luke Rockhold. So we'll react to that live as that happens. But thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. We'll go for about the next 90 minutes or so. And we will react to this news. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Best place to ask your questions, of course, is on MMAfighting.com in the comments section. If you can do that there, that'd be great. Comments that turn green get priority, but not exclusivity. I will try to drop to the bottom today to ask questions that normally I don't get to because of the chronological ordering of things. So I appreciate everyone's participation. Give it a thumbs up if you can. That'd be great. And let's get this started again. As soon as we get some reaction, some news from old Dana White on this. Oh, here we go. It's live. Bisping to face Rockhold. Thank you to my boss. There we go. All right. There we go. Jacare Souza was the #1 choice, according to Dana White, but he is unable to compete due to an injury. Bisping gets the title shot. So there we are. Michael Bisping, forever the bridesmaid and not the bride. He is finally going to get his... Oh, man, let me fix this thing. God damn it. Hang on. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Had to fix this. And now I got to fix this. Yeah, I'm really well prepared, as you can see. All right, here we are. Michael Bisping is going to get the title shot. So it's Rockhold versus Bisping 2. They fought last time in Australia. Bisping was finished with a one-armed guillotine from Mount, although it's not quite one arm because you need the other arm to post to make the one arm work. But you get the idea. He certainly lost via stoppage. Wasn't exactly close, but it was a easy fight to sell because the two had a back and forth. It's been always repeated throughout history that Bisping started that rivalry on a UFC Tonight show when he called himself the unofficial Strikeforce champion after sparring with Luke Rockhold. That is not true. That actually happened on MMA Uncensored Live. I remember what happened because after the commercial break, Michael Bisping looked at me and goes, I don't know if I should have said that. But there you go. Michael Bisping will get the title shot, I guess, after beating Anderson Silva. Now, here's the interesting part. If you follow Michael Bisping on Instagram, I think even Twitter, because I think his Instagram photos go on Twitter, he's been not training. He's been on a movie set. I'm not sure which movie it is. I want to say Jason Statham is in it, but you get the idea. So there you go. 2.5 weeks away. Michael Bisping's going to fight Luke Rockhold. What has he got to lose? I mean, well, everything, I suppose. But at least he got the title shot. He beat Anderson Silva. It's been a strong year for Michael Bisping. He's shooting a movie. He was the winner of the Ultimate Fighter 3, which was... When was the Ultimate Fighter 3? Let's see. The Ultimate Fighter 3. April of 2006. Whoa. April to June of 2006. Wow. 10 years after winning the Ultimate Fighter, Michael Bisping is going to fight for a title. I don't necessarily like his chances. Rockhold already beat him once. He's had a full camp. Even with a full camp, I don't know what Bisping could necessarily do. However, stranger things have happened in mixed martial arts, and it's a bit of a celebration tour of all things Michael Bisping. So there you go. There's your UFC 199 main event. Rockhold versus Bisping 2. I think a lot of folks were saying, why didn't Yoel Romero get it? Wouldn't have been opposed to that necessarily, but it just seems like he wasn't ever really part of the discussion. I think, obviously, the more deserving candidate, even with that Romero loss, because I thought that loss was super controversial, was Jacare, but Jacare got injured beating Vitor Belfort, or at least had an injury before. Anyway, couldn't pass a medical clearance, and if you can't do that, well, what can you do? By the way, I'm drinking water today, less diet soda, in my Stella Artois glass. There was a bar that went out of business down the street, and they were selling all their things. And they sold a 6-pack of Stella Artois glasses. I'm a redneck, so I bought them. It's like $3 or something. All right. I'll take any questions related to this on Twitter if you have them, at SBN Luke Thomas. So this is, Romero is suspended until July. There you go. Forgot about that because I forgot the suspension was still in effect. Fair enough. There you go. So he wasn't eligible anyway. So that left two choices in Rockhold and, in Bisping and Jacare, and then Jacare's injured, so it sort of narrows it down. All right. There we are. Someone says it's a chalice and not a glass, according to Stella. Well, I don't drink Stella in it, so, it's a glass. All right, let's get to these questions, shall we? All right, first one's up. Oh, Jesus, this is long. But it has 4 recs. Oh, it's from last week's MMA beat debate. There's no debate about it. All right, here we go. FS1 viewership versus pay-per-view viewership. I watched the MMA beat last week, and there was a spirited discussion about comparing the number of people who watch FS1 prelims versus a pay-per-view card. I didn't agree with Ariel's idea at all that you could compare Nielsen ratings to pay-per-view buys. Well, you can. It's just very difficult because you're working with a large set of unknowns. And one of the things I didn't get to say on the MMA beat that I think is really relevant to the discussion is that when you put the pay-per-view behind a paywall, I mean, that's what it is. It's pay-per-view. The amount of pirating goes up. Now, there's pirating of cable TV as well. We shouldn't discount that. But the amount of pirating of cable TV for non-marquee attractions, which is what typically goes on the FS1 prelims, even at that headlining role, the 9:30 p.m. fight that goes into the 10 o'clock slot, there is some theft of that. But the amount of theft relative to what's behind the pay-per-view, I suspect is dramatically less. So in terms of the aggregate numbers of people watching, that's a hard thing to quantify. And again, I admit some of the evidence is anecdotal, but it's more than just anecdotal evidence. There's just plenty of reason to believe that the amount of people watching on the main card is substantially greater than the FS1 prelims. Again, depending on the headliner, but I think even in most cases, it's greater. That's where all the marquee attraction is. That's where all the promotion has gone behind. FS1 will put a little bit of promotion behind those prelims, but not a significant amount, not on times where they have a lot of opportunity necessarily to sell it. So to me, that's where all the emphasis goes. That's where all the viewers go. That's where all the activities around. I don't know how you could reasonably claim that FS1 has more, but here you go. You mentioned there was an old UFC study saying there was a viewership for a pay-per-view that was 10 per buy, which even on that show I mentioned was high, but just to give you a sense that it's more than 1-to-1. This was actually reported from Dave Meltzer, and I posted the link at the bottom. The biggest takeaway was the following, quote, "The research showed that it varies based on the event," which makes sense. "The stronger the event, the higher the average. For UFC, a live show on Spike, the number is closer to 1.5 per household. The feeling is there is about 200,000 UFC hardcore pay-per-view fans who will watch the show. The rest are going to buy if friends want them to buy, which is why the numbers vary so much. Most of the audience variants are people who are not MMA fans. From personal experience of watching 90% of UFC's pay-per-views live since early 2006, I completely agree with that statement. Let me ask the following litmus test. JDS versus Kane on Fox did an average of 5.7 million viewers, and the ratings peaked in the United States at around 8.8 million viewers. Does anyone with half a brain actually think that more people decided, does anyone with half a brain actually think that more people watched that than the 4.4 million pay-per-view buys for Mayweather Pacquiao? Certainly not. In closing, someone posted the following chart on Reddit when this discussion came up for boxing pay-per-views. The chart isn't verified, but the general idea I agree with. So for 200 to 400,000 pay-per-view eyes, they estimate it's about 1.5 views per pay-per-view sale. From 400 to 500,000, it's about 2. And from 500,000 to 600,000, it's about 3 views per pay-per-view sales. 1 million buys was closer to 7 per pay-per-view sale, which I completely agree with. The problem with making the argument that I was making was, again, there's a number of just unknowns. How many people are watching in bars? When do sports bars do their biggest business? Some are saying, well, sports bars do their biggest business between 8 and 10. That might be the case for an NBA game, but that's not really true if it's a West Coast game. Those West Coast games get started later. And moreover, on fight night, I had a buddy who ran a sports bar. It's not 8 to 10. It's closer to about 11:30. 11:30 is when it's when the peak business. After that, it kind of tends to drop a little bit. 11:30 to midnight, really, right? Which makes sense, right? Right around main event time. That's when it's filled up the most. That's when the most people are there. That's when the most people are watching. And moreover, that's just for bars. I think most people would agree the main event is going to be more watched than the FS1 prelim main event. Even Ariel didn't disagree with that necessarily. So that's, I don't want to put words in his mouth or distort his argument. But let's say which one has more, the first or second fight on pay-per-view or the FS1 prelim. I would still say the pay-per-view, right? People aren't buying the pay-per-view typically for UFC fans and coming to it late. Once they watch, they're switching automatically. That's when the clustering begins. That clustering effect is kind of hard to quantify. And again, there's going to be a degree to which pirating comes into effect, and that also is hard to quantify. But just speaking realistically, where is all the energy around? What is all the media attention focused on? When does some of the media show up? Some don't show up till late main card or main card at all. That's when all the eyeballs are there. When do the fans show up? Same kind of thing. It's all centered on that main card attraction. It's the prelims on FS1. There is some degree of viewership, but I think there's also a question of the meaningfulness of that viewership. Someone was asking, I think, about this later. I was looking over some of the questions. They're like, the Bellator ratings and the FS1 ratings were not dissimilar, but there's a lot more attention around UFC. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's the UFC, but more than that, Spike has its own audience, and it has MMA fans watching, and there is some overlap in those groups. If there's the Venn diagram, it's MMA fans, Spike audience, and they overlap a little bit. But I think if you see the numbers on Spike being relatively similar or even higher, understand they reach a different audience, where those FS1 numbers, who is FS1's audience outside of UFC events or sporting events generally? It's really low. It's really low. Like Colin Cowherd's on right now. He's doing what, 60,000 people? I mean, two of my live chats, sometimes one of my live chats will beat that, right? So not a lot of people. All right. Boxing, MMA, promotion, Floyd, Conor, Jones, the big question. What do you make of Jon Jones perhaps joining the money team? Considering the recent rumors regarding Conor and Floyd's past declarations that he would like to become involved in MMA management and promotion, surely something is afoot. What the heck is going on, Luke? Do you think some big news is coming soon involving Floyd, Jones, and maybe even Conor too? I don't understand. I've seen that Jon and Floyd talked. We've talked about the money team before. This is really a outfit that promotes Mayweather's brand more than anything else. They have promoted some boxing events, including some PBC ones. They did the one here in DC with Theophane and Broner. But if you look at the stable of Floyd's fighters, not all of them, virtually hardly any of them, are any good. I'm not saying him getting to MMA would be bad, but under what conditions would he do that? What can Floyd reasonably do as a promoter that Jon isn't really getting? Maybe some. I'm not saying there's nothing, but I'd be curious to see what it is. He's already got a manager in Mokikawa, who he's been with for a very long time, and I don't know. I have as many questions about this as you do. I don't pretend in this particular circumstance at all to have all, if any, of the answers. I think it's very much an open question, but I also think that whenever Floyd talks and whatever he says, there is always going to be this discussion of to what extent is he just promoting himself? And I think there's a lot of that. I don't think that's all of it. Certainly don't think he's having these discussions in private for no particular reason, but there you go. Look, I'm not against Floyd getting into the MMA space. I find him no less of a dirtbag than anyone else in the sport. Sure, he has a lot of power, he has a lot of sway, but you're asking me, what is he going to do? Without him declaring anything and without anyone really having any sources on the Mayweather side of things, it's really not clear to me. If we take what he's done in boxing as an example, he's not going to promote Jon in terms of his own fights. That's not going to work. UFC is not going to go co-promote. I mean, it'd be nice if they did, but they're not gonna. And because Jon doesn't have the leverage to make them. And I guess there's other ways they could be promoted. Certainly the alliance of the two would be interesting, but all I'm saying is keep an open mind. The questions are worth asking, but right now we're working with a massively incomplete amount of information. All right. Five top dumbest fight plans and strategies in title fights in recent UFC history as applied by the champ. Well, I know of one right off the top of my head. Who are the three top most intelligent fighters in each weight class? You want me to name all those people? UFC sale. Luke, what are your up-to-date thoughts and understandings of the UFC for sale story? I actually talked with a buddy of mine who works on Wall Street, and he was asking the same very thing. We don't have any additional information at this point. There's nothing really new to add to it. Again, this is a very, very. I don't have a lot of Goldman Sachs connections. I don't have a lot of Deutsche Bank or really anybody on Wall Street who might know. In fact, my buddy on Wall Street was asking me, and I don't know what to tell you. So, well, whatever winds up happening, you just have to wait and see what it is before you can really declare what it's going to be. It's not a really known. This is a lot of uncharted territory. How much are they going to sell for? How much money? What kind of controlling interests are the new owners going to have? What do they want with the product? Obviously, they're going to want more Chinese and East Asian involvement, which could be great. But in what capacity? We'll have to wait and see. UFC 199 replacement. If you could decide, now we know it's Bisping. Who would you choose? Bisping, Jacare, Mousasi, or Hall? I would go with Jacare. Again, I think it's worth, by the way, just going through the exercise here of looking at his resume, because people don't realize this. He hadn't lost. If you don't count the Romero loss, he hadn't lost since losing to Rockhold the first time. So he loses to Rockhold in September of 2011, which he lost. I mean, it was close, but he lost. He then goes on to beat Bristol Marunde, then Derek Brunson. These were both in Strikeforce. Then Ed Herman in Strikeforce. He finishes all three. He KOs Brunson in the first round. He submitted Marunde in the third. He submitted Herman in the first. Then he submits Chris Camozzi in the first. Then he stops Yushin Okami in the first. Then he decisions Francois Carmont. Then he submits Gegard Mousasi. Then he submits again Chris Camozzi. I thought he beat Yoel Romero, but he came up on the wrong end of a decision. And then he beats Vitor Belfort. Now, provided he was not injured, that's a super strong resume right there. Super strong resume. And you got that sort of bookend history going on where, the last person to I would say the case that Rockhold beat Jacare is much stronger than the case that Romero did. There's a lot going for him there. It's an interesting matchup. He's getting older too. Long in the tooth, still pretty athletic, but time is ticking away. But you got to feel good for Michael Bisping. You got to feel good for him. And maybe we can get him on today's show. Let's see. Let me ask my producer on today's show. There we go. All right. Someone says Hall is coming off of a loss to Whitaker. That's true. How could he even be in the discussion? Mousasi is on a one-fight win streak. Sure. Whitaker, Bisping, and Souza are the three guys in the top 10 who are the most deserving of a title shot. I think Bisping should get it simply because of how many times he lost out on title shots to fighters who are known to have PEDs. I'd be okay with that. I'd also say that I have a high opinion of Whitaker. He's been making steady, incredible improvement, but I still feel like he's in the skill-building phase and not in the elite contender phase. And I would like to see him work in his development just a little bit more before we really throw him to the upper end of the division. I think if given the proper time, he can do a lot up there. This is not a statement of saying he can't do it. This just means there might be certain conditions where he can do that a lot better than the current ones. Okay. Werdum's weight gain. Luke, one thing I noticed, actually, this is a good question. One thing I noticed was that Werdum looked a little less mobile, and physically he looked more out of shape on Saturday night. He was 232 for the Travis Brown fight and the Mark Hunt fight. He weighed in at 236 against Kane, and he was 240 against Miocic. The weight he put on clearly was not muscle. I was just surprised how he looked given the amount of time to prepare and how big the fight was. Werdum was the guy who got to Mexico months in advance to prepare for Kane, and he didn't look as prepared last Saturday. I don't think that's a bad question at all, but to me, I don't think that's why he lost. Now, it may not have helped him, certainly, especially if the fight had gone longer. We would have been able to ascertain whether or not it had any real noticeable impact on his cardio. But if you watch the Monday Morning Analyst, I think I wish I could do the episode over because I had some insights that I want to share after I'd already recorded it. But basically, it's this. People were saying, oh, how could you say this? Werdum's been blitzing for all his career. It's true he likes to phase shift, punch with one side, then step forward and punch with the other side a little bit. But it's not true that he would like to run after a guy in the same kind of way. Usually he would push a guy back when they were just defending, which is what I mentioned on the podcast, either to lock up the clinch and fire him up, to back him up with strikes as they defend. And it usually started in a more central position into the fence line, or at least behind the concentric black taped octagon spaces inside the larger octagon. It never really was a case where he got Miocic back up to the fence, and so here's Werdum and here's Miocic. Werdum should have gone this way, waited, and then pushed. Instead, he kind of followed him. And as the course of following him, that's when he got tagged again. He got tagged. Remember, he fell right against the fence line. He didn't fall with his hips facing the fence. He actually fell with his hips kind of like perpendicular to them. Or even, I guess, even parallel, depending on how you want to define it. But like hip, fence line. Here's the fence, and here's his hips. So I guess perpendicular. That should tell you that there was a little bit of a desperation in that. Now, what was the desperation coming from? Was it momentarily? Maybe. I don't know. But the key idea is this, was that in all the other examples of him launching these forward blitzes, at least in the Miocic fight, there were 5 of them. The 5th one is the one that he got clipped on and closed the show. The 4th one he got hit on. But here's what I mean. In the first 3, all Miocic did was cover up and back up. He would block a shot. He'd have a hand up. He'd have another hand out. He would either block a punch, and put a hand on the shoulder to keep Werdum away, block a punch and circle out, not simply straight back, but circle out. There was one time he kind of went straight back and got tagged and then circled out after that. But the point being is this, Miocic never really let him get anywhere with it. Miocic used strong defense to not take a lot of punishment. He used great footwork and great angles to stay away from the spacing that Werdum was trying to collapse and the angles that Werdum was looking for. And he never really just shelled. He never just covered up like this. He kind of waited with his eyes open, but blocking to see what he needed to do to make the kind of lateral movements he needed to make. He did that 3 times where Werdum, again, he had one punch that snuck through, I think, on the 2nd or 3rd blitz, but it wasn't a lot. And then in the 4th one, that's when Miocic retaliated. So he circled, blocked, and then threw the right hand. And then threw the right hand, so he throws the right, bang, and then circles off of that right, okay? But that's when he was kind of against the fence line. Rather than Werdum coming out and blocking him, Werdum continued to chase and got clipped with another right. In many of the other circumstances when Werdum did that, guys weren't firing back. When he got clipped on that 4th blitz with that right hand, that I don't know if it rocked him, but it certainly knocked his feet off balance a little bit. That should have been a cue to him to not keep doing that, to reset, create a better position, and then if you want to keep blitzing, fine. Plus, you had him dead to rights if you wanted to properly cage cut, and he didn't. So it was just a lot of noticeable, identifiable, strategic mistakes. That's what it was to me. He was chasing an opponent. He was chasing an opponent who was never letting him get close enough. He was chasing an opponent who was using proper footwork to create space. He was chasing an opponent who had really great defense. He didn't just shell up. He did block. He did do defensive maneuvers, but defensive maneuvers that allowed him to think the whole time. There's this amazing video by Travis Stevens. I don't know if you guys know who Travis Stevens is. Boy, I have a lot of respect for Travis Stevens. Travis Stevens is a U.S. Olympic judoka. He was a member of I think the 2008 and 2012 squads. I think he's probably going to make the 2016 squad. He got silver at the Pan Am Games this year. He's medaled there. Let me look up his resume. I know he medaled previously. Let me look up his old donk resume. Travis Stevens is a very accomplished guy. So Travis Stevens, 2009, he won the Pan Am Games. He won the Pan American Games in 2015 as well. I guess in the Pan Am Championships, he got silver this year at 81 kilos. So he's a black belt in judo and an Olympic level judoka, number 1. Number 2, he's a black belt in pure jiu-jitsu under Renzo Gracie or John Danaher. I'm not sure exactly who gave him his black belt under that team, basically. He has this video that he put out maybe a couple of years ago where he talks about what mental toughness is. And what mental toughness is, he would be like, we'd go through a 2 or 3 hour workout and I would make it to the end of the workout and I would be like, oh, I'm so mentally tough because I can make it to the end of these long, grueling workouts. And what he said was like, basically anybody can do that, right? You can just sort of coast through a workout if you have to, and you can reach the finish line. You might be exhausted and beat up and tired, but you can just kind of like go on autopilot and then just go. And he realized after the 2008 games that I'm not sure exactly what incident happened at those games, but his point was as follows. And this relates back to Werdum a little bit, that real mental toughness in the physical competitive sense is when even under duress or fatigue or challenge, your brain always continues to think. You're always thinking. You're not going on autopilot. You'll notice a lot of times you might notice if you're on a run and you're tired or you're lifting weights, you're on that last rep, you kind of just mentally shut off just to, hit that last push press or bench press or the last quarter mile or, whatever it is. You kind of just shut off. Or if you have to run up a big hill, you just turn your mind off. You just try to get up as fast as you can. And he was saying that's really the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it is to constantly be thinking, constantly aware. Stipe Miocic was always putting himself in a position where he was never getting physically overwhelmed with the spacing or the distancing. He was always resetting the position in a way that was the best for him. He was never getting trapped against the fence. At one time where he came close, Werdum made the strategic error, but he did all the right things. He was circling back, and he would have come back around. Remember, he hit him with the right hook. On the fourth blitz, when he first hit him with the right hook, what did he do? He angled off to the right. He didn't need to angle off on the fifth one because Werdum entered the land of wind and ghosts. But you get the idea. He was always thinking. He was always putting himself in a position to make great choices. That's why he won that fight. So to your point, did Werdum look a little not the best I've ever seen him? Sure. No doubt about it. And maybe that had an effect. Maybe that says something about his camp, that he didn't do the right kind of strength and conditioning. Maybe all of that had an impact. But certainly what we can say is strategically he made bad choices in the moment of that fight, adjusting to what Stipe Miocic was doing. He just was not accustomed to a striker who wouldn't just cover up and he just was never playing Verdum's game with that. And I think Werdum was like, I got to find a way to make him play this game. And as he got increasingly desperate on that fifth and final blitz, after eating a right hook on that fourth blitz, he closed the show. But just sort of tells you, it's like Miocic tactically did make all the right decisions, but he was able to make those decisions, one, because he has those abilities, but two, he's able to bring those abilities to life because he's not doing this. He's doing this, right? Hand up here. He's always paying attention. He's always thinking. Whatever the duress is, he's got some 250-pound Brazilian monster running at him. He's still making smart decisions. That, to me, is why he's the champion today. And let me go back and address something that I mentioned this on the podcast as well, and I'll move on to some other questions. But folks were asking me, like getting a prediction wrong or right, I don't feel like is the end of the world. But, for example, I picked Lawal. I thought Lawal at worst got a draw in that fight with Davis, but it more or less happened how I thought it was going to happen. The takedown was not a big portion of that fight at all. It didn't happen until the third round, until Lawal got clipped. And he was able to avoid the submission and stand back up. The takedown, the wrestling was not a big issue. It was the striking that won. And I thought Lawal did better body work in the first and second round. Okay, we can reasonably disagree, but that's what I thought. That's basically what happened. Like, it's not too far from what I thought was going to happen, right? What you get them wrong, you get them right, but that's whatever. What I had thought that Werdum was going to do was stay out of trouble against better strikers more recently. Now, not early in his career, either against Antonio Silva and certainly not against Junior Dos Santos, but more recently, he would find ways to mix it up a little bit, and certainly he did against Cain Velasquez, but he would generally find a way to stay out of a big punch. He would generally find a way to stay out of what the other person does really well when they can really bring their strengths to bear, and he just completely abandoned that here. That I was not expecting. That I didn't see that coming. And he paid for it dearly. All right, UFC fantasy matchups. I will do this as fast as possible. Miocic versus Rumble. Miocic can take a shot, too. Gustafsson, Rockhold. I'll say Gustafsson. Shogun versus Belfort. Shogun. Hall versus Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy. Nick Diaz versus Musasi. Lawler versus RDA. Lawler's too big. Edgar versus Dillashaw. Probably Edgar. Edgar versus Cruz. I don't know. I want to see that one. Mighty Mouse versus Lineker. At Mighty Mouse versus Lineker. Mighty Mouse. CM Punk versus me. Yeah, no one wants to see me fight CM Punk, I can assure you. Europa League final. Today is the Europa League final between Sevilla and Liverpool. Are you going to watch it? No. And if so, who you got? Torn. I always root for La Liga teams, but I like what old Klopp has done for Liverpool. So we'll see. Fighter walk in safety and security. Even though Matt Brown had angered the home crowd at the weigh-ins, there are no excuses for attacks on his person, period. What steps do you feel the UFC should take now to ensure fighter safety as they make their way to the cage? I'm not sure what they can do except to make the expanse of their walkway wider, because they're not going to use a ramp. If you have a ramp, you'll notice that there's not just a space between the person and their the ramp. Depending on how the ramp looks, there's actually lighting along the ramp. So there's the ramp, which is elevated, plus lighting along the way. There might even be pyrotechnics. So the people are kind of separated from that. Now, as they get to the end of the ramp, it kind of the seating gets a little bit closer. But the UFC is not going to do that. So what are they going to do? I guess unless they widen the walkway, I don't know. I mean, they're coming out with, I don't know if they're armed, but they're coming out with security to escort them there. But, you think of who was the female tennis player who got stabbed on the court? Not Steffi Graf. It was it Monica Seles? Who was it? Stabbed. Yeah, Monica Seles. She was stabbed about, 23 years ago. You just wonder I guess if their security at the gate is tight as they come into the facility, you wouldn't have to worry about this. But imagine you can imagine it's happened before. Someone has snuck through a knife and they have a seat right on there. They could do it. The only way I think to separate that would be just to widen the path of the walkway. And I don't know how feasible that is from a seating arrangement venue to venue. It may not be all that possible. Some of those entrances are designed for different purposes in mind, and it's tough. It's a tough call. Plus, if you've never been to one of these events, what winds up happening is if you sit in a section, let's say your section is here, and the walkway is here, as the fighters come out or in, depending if it's the same one or if it's a fight night card, people just get up off their seats and they all kind of coalesce here. And so it just gets overcrowded too. It can be a mess. Is Overeem essentially a lock for the next heavyweight title shot? Seems that way. I'm not sure who else they really put in there. I mean, let's look at the guys who are available, right? It's not a lot of dudes, man. And even if there was more choices, I don't know how many of them are better than him. I mean, he seems to be the train coming. All right, so you've got Werdum calling for an immediate rematch. I mean, I don't think it's not how this business works, unfortunately. Then you got Cain Velasquez. He's tied up with Travis Stevens. So are they really going to wait that long? I don't think so. Then you got Overeem. Dos Santos just won, but this is his first one winning. He already lost to Overeem. Plus he had surgery. You got Ben Rothwell, who just lost. Arlovsky, who just lost. Travis Brown's tied up. Then you got Mark Hunt. You could do that, I suppose, but I don't know. Josh Barnett, you're not going to do. Roy Nelson, you're not going to do. Then Lewis, Mir, Struve, Bekhamedov, and Oleinik. It's your best choice, right? Simply by a process of elimination, that's your best choice. Dana White says he doesn't know if Ronda Rousey will be ready for UFC 205. The only thing the least bit surprising about this is that Uncle Fester, that's what this guy says, actually said it out loud. My prediction that she will never fight again, which I made an hour after her last fight, is still very much alive. In Budo, we trust. I suspect you will see her again. Here's the issue. I think it is highly contingent upon what happens in that fight, whether or not there is a longer career after that. So, for example, let's say she fights Tate upon her return. I don't know that she will, but let's just sort of say that. And let's say she loses to Tate. Let's say she loses to Tate via stoppage. I recognize that this is not necessarily the likeliest outcome, but just work with me here. If she lost twice in a row via stoppage and to her number one nemesis, who she'd already beaten twice, I wonder if she just might call it quits after that. She seems to have taken this loss uniquely hard, which is understandable. I don't make fun of her for it in any capacity whatsoever, but it has certainly taken a toll on her. And I think the demands of the job generally have taken a toll on her. For her to given all the other options that she has, and who knows how long those will last if she doesn't fight. But for now, it probably seems like they're going to be here a while. Does she really want to keep doing this? Does she really have it in her? I mean, this rebound fight for her is big. If it was me, I'd make it a tune-up fight, but it's not me. So, okay. Chael starting submission to Underground Promotion. I wrote the article breaking this. I'm not sure it got linked around that much, but neither here nor there. So I spoke to Chael about this, but we had like a 30-minute conversation. In any event, okay. What are your thoughts, hopes, and fears regarding this venture? I have no fears. It's not my money. Thoughts, good to see someone else trying to do professional grappling. As I noted in the article, it's very, very difficult to make any money in this. You know, everyone's like, well, the IBJJF should pay people more. IBJJF stays in business because they charge people. I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't pay people more, but there's a couple of nuggets in that article that I really wanted people to get across. Number one, Chael got the approval of Eddie Bravo to use EBI rules. Now, the slight twist on it is that the first period for the grappling in Submission Underground is only going to be 8 minutes. That's not what Eddie Bravo does, but okay, they're going to use 8 minutes. After that, it becomes basically the same thing. But what Chael told me, and I put in that article, was Chael and Eddie want the EBI rules to become the grappling version of the unified rules. That's the first thing. But the second thing he said that I think is really kind of important here, and it's a point I think I've made on this chat a few times as well. MMA is interesting in that it's a small population of guys trying to do it, at least worldwide or, you know, relative to something else. And it can have at times a very large audience. Grappling is precisely the opposite. The number of grapplers anywhere is, you know, orders of magnitude bigger than the number of fighters. The problem is that no one really wants to watch it. For now, anyway. We'll see what these guys can do. But he made the point in the article that, like, when he would go to these MMA gyms, it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys. And there's some gyms that are bigger than that, of course. But, you know, there's not a lot of fighters and not a lot of gyms. You know, the Tuesday night class last night at my gym, there must have been 50 people there. Guys, girls, heavyweights, middleweights, flyweights. You get the whole thing. You can get a lot of looks when you're training. You can do a gi, you can do a no gi. There's the number of grapplers is huge. It's huge, especially relative to MMA fights. It's just that, do people really want to watch this who aren't participants? I feel like it's powerlifting. You know, I've been getting into powerlifting recently, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like, it's these guys who do it on their own time. They show up to weekend meets, they compete, their friends, their family show up, but this is not necessarily something, unless it's at the truly elite level or like attached to something with some, you know, more grandiose trimmings like the Olympics. And I recognize that Olympic lifts are different than power lifts, but you get the idea. Unless it's attached to something like that, there's no audience for it. I feel like it's very much the same. So that's the challenge he's up against, is how do I utilize this massive resource that is hard to monetize versus MMA, where it's like these limited resources that, while not easy to monetize, certainly you've seen the difference in the commercial upside. So, but I think that's what he's trying to sort of do, is say, how do we got all these guys, we must be able to find a way to make use of them. What do you make of the lineup already announced? I think it's really good. There is a fight they haven't announced yet, not a fight, a match they haven't announced yet. I can't say who it is, but if they make it, I think you'll find it intriguing, to put it mildly. It'd be two people who haven't done it yet, who would be kind of fun to see. One of them I have a little bit of an issue with, but whatever. And would you ever consider competing as a special guest? No, I will never compete. Never. Ever. I will never compete. All right, okay, I won't say never. Oh, likely never. I will likely never compete. No one wants to see it. I don't care about doing it. And I recognize that people are always like, you need to compete to get better. There's a lot of truth to that. It doesn't interest me. I have very limited free time as it is. The least interesting thing to me on earth is driving to some BFE area of a neighboring state and sitting in a high school gymnasium waiting to take on some other accountant who is doing this. It does not interest me at all. I will just work with the people in my gym. I will take seminars. I will visit other schools. I might on some point ever compete. I don't know, but I don't care about it. Competing does not interest me in the slightest. And no one wants to see it. Like, you think you want to see it? Trust me, you don't want to see it. Heavyweight belt changing hands. In the history of the UFC, no heavyweight has defended the belt more than twice. Do you think Stipe will buck this trend? I have no idea, man. But if you think about who's on the horizon, you've got Cain Velasquez coming back. That's going to be an interesting fight. Overeem is a super tough challenge. Who else? JDS might get back and hammer him out. JDS already beat him. Mark Hunt, I don't think is going to do too well if he ever gets a chance, but because they already got hammered out. But look, I'll say his chance is as good as anybody else's, right? I thought for sure Velasquez would do it. Nope. So this is in a profoundly unpredictable sport with weird consequences. Let's jump down a little bit to the bottom to get some of the more. John Nash recently laid out a seemingly plausible legal route for the Mayweather-McGregor bout based on the Muhammad Ali Act. In other words, that McGregor would claim he's a boxer and therefore would be subject to the protections of the Muhammad Ali Act. Yeah, he'd get fought in court, and the UFC would launch an injunction quickly, and I don't think it would happen. I have a very, very hard time believing that Conor McGregor is going to try to do this, and he would win in litigation with the UFC hammering down every dollar they had imaginable to stop that. This sounds nice in theory. In practicality, I don't think it works at all. Weidman's return timeline. Did y'all see his Facebook post? Whew. He's getting neck surgery, and he can say what he wants. I'll be back in 6 to 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it is as a recovery timeline. That neck surgery, if that doesn't scare you, man, I don't know what does. Cris seems optimistic that whether he has the disc fused or removed, he could still return in time for the MSG show. How serious are these operations for an athlete, and do you think he could return from something like that and go straight into a title fight against someone like Luke Rockhold? Here's what I would say. Remember, I was on MMA Uncensored Live with Nate Quarry. Nate Quarry, I don't know to what extent it was similar, but he did have neck surgery where I think he had a fusion, and it was one of these experimental No, he had it removed and I believed replaced with an artificial disc in his neck, and he was saying it did wonders for him. In fact, he was able to come back, and I think that was the Credor fight. If I'm not mistaken, let me see the timeline here. Nate. Quarry. Because he had a terrible surgery. Maybe it was the Jason McDonald fight. Maybe he got off the Demian Maia fight. I can't quite be sure. It was around that time, but he was telling me he was in abject misery, and actually the UFC paid for his surgery, which is something he said he's always been grateful for. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but certainly this seems like a fair representation of the things he had told me. And he actually had done, even at the time when he was on the show, he was doing speaking tours about how revolutionary that surgery was and just what a tremendous benefit it was to his life, because at the time those surgeries were relatively new. He had to fly to a different country to get it. It wasn't any surgeon here who was, I think at the time, capable of doing it. That may be different now, but I think it was in somewhere in Europe. Can't remember. In any event, and he said it changed his life completely. So the chances of a full recovery for something like this, I think, is fine. But you just begin to inventory all the things that Weidman has done to his body, from breaking fragile and hard to heal bones in his foot to various knee injuries to now neck, who God knows how awful his shoulders are. Any kind of like real essential joint or meeting place between two different parts of the body, I bet all of his are wrecked. These guys are going to have unbelievable arthritis among a variety of other problems as they age. So, this is why they got to get paid. You see things like this where the guy has vertigo and he's not willing to pull out of the fight. Now, I'm not saying Chris Weidman has not been properly compensated. I don't know about his particular financial arrangement, but I don't think that kind of attitude about pushing through injury is particularly unique among this population of fighters. And this is why they need to get paid. These guys are going to be, just absolutely, disabled might be a strong word, but, and I know he has done professional wrestling, but remember, Kurt Angle has done, he was a highly successful amateur wrestler at all levels, including the highest level. I saw him at Bellator, was it 149 backstage? You cannot imagine how hobbled he is. It was shocking. And I can imagine that most of those injuries, or at least those injuries, had a bigger effect as he got older through professional wrestling. I don't think he can turn his neck. I don't think he can do that. And MMA I don't think is quite as hard on the body given other factors as other things, but Man. Someone says, congratulate. Oh, James Glory. Everybody loves James. Congratulations, Mike Bisping. He has been dreaming of this for years. Hopefully, there's a great rematch. Bisping has been doing movies, as Luke says, but Bisping is always in super shape, so he won't be looking flabby, I bet. I know, but I bet he wish he'd gotten under different circumstances. Here's another comment. Look, I was nearly screaming at my screen last week when Ariel and Co. disagreed with you regarding the number of viewers when it comes to prelims on FS1 or pay-per-view fights. This weekend, like always, we had a group of people over to watch the UFC card. Most are very casual fans that only know the biggest names. I asked the ones that I deemed more casual if they even knew there were prelim fights. Of the 10 casual fans, only 3 knew about the prelims, and only 1 knew they were on FS1. Furthermore, there were 4 of us watching the prelims and pay-per-view, and 18 people watching just the pay-per-view card. When the main card starts, people show up, pitch in their $5 and watch. And he says he agrees with me. I don't know how you can disagree. Let's see. Any news on USADA and Machida? Nothing yet. Nothing yet. But certainly as that develops, we will give you guys some updates. True, false. Davis and King Mo combined only making $10K more in disclosed earnings for the main event than a Northcutt $80K prelim win purse is a bad look for free agency. I think those guys have different ways in which they pocket money throughout their contract. But if that is correct, certainly it would tell you not everyone is going to want to seek free agency for the same reasons. Free agency is not going to work for everyone. It's not true that everyone can go and all of a sudden this is like some magical panacea that will assuage all your fears and alleviate all of your heavy burdens. No, it's only going to work for certain people. Cyborg won't fight anyone but unpolished cants at catchweights in the UFC. There